Welcome to the Corp Vault channel. In this video we will discuss Microsoft Always On Availability Group Backup Configuration using Commvault. Please like, share, comment or suggest. Subscribe for more videos, and you can follow us on Instagram. In our previous video, we discussed standalone SQL Server configuration. In this video, we will discuss how to configure Microsoft Always On Availability Group for backups. In Commvault, SQL Always On AG Group Client is a pseudo client. For you to be able to create the pseudo client, SQL Agent should be installed on all the nodes that are part of the AG cluster. Ensure you verify all the nodes are visible in Commvault with SQL Agent installed before you proceed with pseudo client creation. Right-click on Client Computers. Select New Client. Add New Client window. Scroll down and look for Applications. Under Applications, select MS SQL AG Client. Create MS SQL AG Client window. General tab. In the New Client text box, type the name for the availability group client you are creating. The name of the AG client has no dependency on the actual availability groups. Under SQL Client, select a client from the list on which SQL Agent is installed, and is the primary replica of the availability group. Ideally, the client should have SQL 2012 or later installed on them. SQL Instances. If the SQL client has only one instance, then that instance is automatically selected. If more than one instance exists, select an instance from the list of available SQL instances. Availability Group. If the SQL client has only one availability group, then that availability group is automatically selected. If not, select an availability group from the list. Storage Policies tab. Select a default database storage policy from the list, and select a default log storage policy from the list. Once done, click OK. The AG client should be successfully configured. Before we proceed, let's discuss a bit about SQL Always On AG Group. For this video, let's discuss a two-node SQL Always On AG Group, or cluster. We will discuss only what you should know as a backup admin. We will not discuss in details, so please go through Microsoft website for details. Always On feature was introduced in SQL Server 2012. This new feature combines the best of failover clustering and database mirroring, and overcomes major of the limitations imposed in failover clustering, or a database mirroring setup. Always On is a high availability and disaster recovery solution in SQL Server 2012 or later, which improves high availability and protects data of your mission-critical applications. The Always On Availability Group is based on Windows Server Failover Cluster, and hence you need to install the failover clustering feature on each server or replica, and create a failover cluster adding all these server or replicas before you can start enabling or creating the availability group. Always On Failover Cluster Instance is an enhancement to the existing SQL Server failover clustering, which provides higher availability of SQL Server instance after failover. Always On Availability Group allows you to create a group of databases, which failover together as a unit from one replica, or instance of SQL Server, to another replica, or instance of SQL Server in the same availability group. Each availability group that we create allows you to create only one availability group listener, which is nothing but a virtual network name to be used by clients to connect to the availability group. You install Commvault SQL Agent on each of the replica nodes. After Commvault Agent install, you should be able to create pseudo client for AG Group database backups. Please note, any database that is not part of AG Group will be backed up from the physical node. There are also scenarios seen where the database is backed up twice, that is, one from physical node, and other from AG Group. In that case, After agreement with SQL admin, disable auto discovery on physical node. Doing so, you need to manually add a database to backup from physical node, which are not part of AG group. To reduce load on the primary replica, SQL admins configure database backups to run via secondary replica, so ensure the replica is in 100% sync for successful backups. Let's proceed with the AG group configuration. SQL AG sudo client is configured successfully. SQL AG client icon would look like this. The product version and updates depend on what has been installed on the physical nodes. Double-click the client computer. This is the agent type. As this is a sudo client, you do not see file system agent listed. Install date shows the day and date when the agent was installed, or reinstalled, or upgraded. Double-click on the SQL server. You see all the AG group instances configured on the server. You can also view the SQL version from here. Let's pick one instance for our discussion. Right-click on the instance. These are the available menu options. Select Properties. Properties of SQL Server. General tab. Client name displays the name of the sudo client. iData agent displays the name of the agent. Instance name displays the name of the selected SQL instance. Version displays the SQL version. Server type displays the server type according to the instance. VDI timeout. We discussed this topic in detail in our other video, Standalone Microsoft SQL Server Configuration for Backup. Please go through it. The VDI timeout value of 6 × 9 is set in seconds. When restoring a SQL database, the VDI timeout represents the time the system must wait for the SQL server to become ready to accept data into the database. If the database you are attempting to restore is particularly large, it may become necessary to increase this timeout value. Last seen primary replica shows the node name on which the instance is seen as active and acting as primary replica. Availability replica clients shows the node names on which this instance is part of and can fail over to. You can use update to discover the AG cluster nodes for this instance. Accounts tab. Override higher levels settings. To override the account settings configured at the control panel, client group, and agent level for the selected instance. Use local system account. To use the Windows account configured to run the CVD service. By default, this is the local system account. This account is used by the system to perform all operations including backup, restore and browse. Select impersonate user to enter a username and password. For the user that has permission to perform all operations including backup, restore and browse, the account must have local administrator privileges, and be a member of the SQL sysadmin fixed server role, for the instance. Once done, click OK or Cancel. Double-click on the instance. This is the default subclient. Double-click on the subclient to launch its properties, or right-click and select Properties. General tab. Client name displays the name of the client computer. Agent displays the name of the agent installed. Instance displays the name of the instance to which this subclient belongs. Subclient name displays the default name, and this can be changed to a name of your choice, but do remember this is the default subclient. Allow multiple data readers for backup copy. This option specifies whether multiple data reads are allowed for a single Windows physical drive during backups on this subclient. This should be selected only for specialized hardware such as RAID, or possibly in the case of spanned volumes. Disable auto discovery. By default, when a new user database is created, it is automatically discovered and added to the subclient. Selecting this option will disable the auto discovery and pre-assignment of SQL databases to this subclient, or any other subclient manually created. Do note, any database which is not part of the AG group, like systemdbs, or any other user DB, has to be backed up from the physical node as a standalone backup, as they are not visible in the AG configuration. Use the description field to enter useful information like change ticket, incident ticket, cautionary notes, etc. Content tab. Database list displays the names of databases that are currently included in the content. Click Configure to discover and add databases to the content. Database configuration window. Click Discover. It will scan the SQL instance and lists all the databases configured under it. You can select each database and assign it to the subclient. If needed, you can even mark a database to not backup. You can select all the databases and assign it to a subclient using option Change all selected databases to. If you wish to not backup a particular database, select the database and associate it with Do Not Backup. Once done, click OK. If you wish to remove one or more items from the subclient content, select the item and click Delete. Backup Rules tab. The information below is important to understand, as the options helps to enable or disable backup rules, used to convert backup jobs under certain circumstances to prevent failures. Convert option is enabled by default, and it switches backup types as indicated under given circumstances. If this option is disabled or cleared, then all backup jobs for master database will be converted to full backups. Backup jobs for MSDB and model will run as is. For any user-defined database, the system will fail the backup jobs that fits these given circumstances. Log backups. Convert a log backup to full. If a log backup was performed using other software, indicates that the next backup should be run as a full backup. When a full or differential backup is performed outside of the system, for example, if SQL admin took a full, or differential, or log backup using SQL Management Studio, then the log chain is seen as broken to Commvault. Therefore, it is recommended to run the full backup using Commvault. Do not convert log backups to full. If log backup was performed using other software, indicates that the next backup should be run as a log backup. When using this option, make sure to enable the Disable Log Consistency check in the SQL Settings tab, to ensure that the backup job completes successfully. If this option is not selected, the backup job will fail with the error, "Backup chain is broken." File or file groups are added, is enabled by default, which means the next backup job is switched to a full backup. If this option is cleared, the selected backup type continues unchanged. Storage Device tab. Data Storage Policy. Select a storage policy from the list to which backups will be associated. Use Data Paths option to view or modify the data paths associated with the primary storage policy copy of the selected storage policy. This would help to route the data between data paths when you see issues with a particular data path. Incremental Storage Policy displays the name of the incremental storage policy. If the selected storage policy has the incremental storage policy option enabled. Use Create Storage Policy to launch the Create a Storage Policy wizard for creating a new storage policy. Number of streams for data backup displays the number of streams used for backup operations. Change the number of streams as desired. The more the streams, the more the load on the SQL server. We recommend using one stream if backup data is less, say about less than 1 terabyte, but it is up to you. Log Storage Policy tab. Storage Policy. Select a storage policy from the list to which transaction log backups will be associated. Number of streams for transaction log displays the number of streams used for log backup operations. Change the number of streams as desired. As transaction log backups would not be large, we recommend using one stream to reduce load on the server. Data Transfer Option tab. Software Compression. Please read this statement carefully. You can enable software compression on client, which we recommend, or on Media Agent, or use storage policy settings, or turn it off. Please note, hardware compression has priority over the software compression. Software compression option will take effect when the data path is associated with a disk library, or when hardware compression is disabled, in the data path associated with tape libraries. Resource tuning indicates the processes used by the client to transfer data, and whether bandwidth throttling is enabled or not. Network agents specifies the number of data pipes, or processes, that the client uses to transfer data over a network. Increasing this value may provide better throughput, if the network and the network configuration in your environment can support it. The default value is 2, and a maximum of 4 can be set if necessary. Throttle network's bandwidth in MB per hour. By default this option is not selected, and therefore the throughput is not controlled. When selected, the backup throughput is controlled. You can specify a value for the throughput. By default, this is set to 500. The minimum value is 2 megabytes, and the maximum you can set is approximately 2 petabyte. Use this option to set the backup throughput based on the network's bandwidth in your environment. Use it to reduce the backup throughput, so that the entire network's bandwidth is not consumed, especially in slow links. Increasing this value will end up consuming the bandwidth. Please note, throttling is done on per network agent basis. Application read size. This option specifies the amount of application data that backup jobs will read for each unit transferred to the media agent. For SQL, the value is by default set to 2 megabytes, which ideally should be equal or greater than the value of maximum transfer size. Otherwise, the backups might fail. Just to let you know, this value may be increased to reduce the amount of data read from the given application, which in turn reduces the amount of I/O operations performed against it. As a result, overall backup performance may increase. However, backup memory usage may also increase, which may inadvertently consume additional resources from the application. Therefore, set this value at either the default value, or match the block size directed by the application. Deduplication tab. Enable deduplication. Use this option to enable or disable deduplication for the subclient. If enabled, you can choose to generate the signature on the client or on the media agent computer. The deduplication is supported on disk storage devices. Therefore, the deduplication options are applicable only if the subclient is associated with a storage policy containing disk storage. Activity Control tab. By default, Enable Backup is checked. If you clear this option, then backups will be started as per schedule, but are failed to start, with reason data management activity is disabled. When you clear this option, you get another option to enable backup after a delay. You can choose the option to select a specific date and time when the backup activity can be enabled. Exclude from SLA and strike counts. When this option is selected, the client is excluded from the service level agreement, SLA calculation and the client strike calculation for the worldwide dashboard, COMCEL dashboard, SLA report, and client strike count report. When this option is cleared, the client is included in these calculations. Encryption tab. By default, Network and Media Agent side is selected, which means data is encrypted before transmission and is stored encrypted on the media. During restore operations, data is decrypted by the client. None means no encryption will take place during backup operations. Media only, media agent side, means raw data is transferred over the network, and then encrypted on the media agent prior to storage on media. Network only, agent encrypts, media agent decrypts. When selected, data is encrypted for transmission and then decrypted prior to storage on the media. During restore operations, data is encrypted by the media agent and then decrypted in the client. IntelliSnap Operations tab. Using these settings, you can take IntelliSnap backup with hardware snap engines. Please note, you can take only full and differential backups using IntelliSnap. You cannot perform log backups. Enable IntelliSnap backup for this subclient. Once enabled, you receive a warning, and the warning says the next backup will be full backup. Available snap engines lists the available snapshot engine vendors. Select a snapshot engine vendor from the list that is configured in your environment. Manage Array provides access the Array Management window, which helps you to add or modify access information for an array. Use Proxy. Select the proxy server that will be used for performing the IntelliSnap backup operations. Use separate proxy for backup copy. You can select a different proxy that can be used to perform backup copy, that is, copy of IntelliSnap backup to a different backend storage. Use source if proxy is unreachable, which means, if the proxy client is unreachable, use the source computer, which is typically the client server, which will be used during snap backup of the job. Proxy for SQL integrity check. You can specify a proxy via which integrity check of a hardware snap can be performed during an IntelliSnap backup. Select the proxy server from the list. Name the SQL server name. You can also specify specific credentials that can be used to connect to the SQL server via the selected proxy. If you disable IntelliSnap backup for this subclient, you receive a warning. Warning says the next backup will be full backup. Advanced Options tab. Block level backup operations. You can perform block level backup operation on SQL databases. After enabling block level backup operations on a subclient, all database backup operations that you run on this subclient are full backup operations. Transaction log backups still run as traditional Virtual Device Interface (VDI) backups. We discussed VDI in our other video. To enable block level, select the Optimize for Table Level Restore checkbox. Once enabled, a message appears that tells you that the next backup will be converted to a full backup. Security tab. This window helps to identify the users, user groups, and roles associated with the subclient. You can add, edit or remove security associations for the subclient. Include inherited associations. Helps lists all of the inherited security associations that affect the subclient. SQL Settings tab. Block size specifies the block size that will be used during backup. The default block size for write operation is 64 kilobytes. To increase the block size, enter any value from 512 bytes to 64 kilobytes. Buffer count specifies the total number of buffers that will be used to receive data from SQL Server during backup. The default value of buffer count is 20. You can increase the buffer count if needed. Do note, buffer count should be equal or greater than the number of streams. Maximum transfer size is the maximum amount of data transferred at a time during a backup operation. The default value is 2048 KB. You can enter any value from 64 KB to 4 MB. All data is transferred in multiples of 64 KB. Disable log consistency check. By default, log consistency check option is enabled, and the software will check for log consistency during backup. If detected that the backup chain is broken, the job will not proceed. Select this option to disable log consistency checking. When disabled, if the software detects that the chain is broken, the job will not fail, but the database being backed up may not be restored later on. Once done, click OK. Subclient is configured successfully. Let's review the backup options. Right-click on Subclient. These are the available menu options. Select Backup. Backup options for subclient. You can select one of the below backup types. Full specifies the job as a full backup of the databases. Transaction log specifies the job as a transaction log backup. This will back up the transaction log, providing point-in-time restore functionality. Do not truncate log will not prune the logs. This means the operation will back up the transaction log in situations where the database is damaged or has not been recovered. Differential specifies the job as a differential backup, which backs up only that portion of the data that is new or has changed since the last full backup. Job initiation. You can run the job immediately or schedule it as needed. Click Configure to specify the schedule details. Click Advanced. Advanced Backup Options. Data tab. Start log backup after successful backup. Selecting this option starts the transaction log backup automatically, after a successful full or differential backup. Use this option when you want to backup logs immediately after a data backup without creating two scheduled jobs. Copy only option applies to full backups using VSS and full IntelliSnap backups. It creates an independent backup that does not affect the usual chaining involved in traditional backups. It also does not affect the overall backup and restore procedures. After taking a full copy-only backup, you cannot run log backups unless a traditional full backup is present. You can run differential backups, however, you cannot restore them unless a traditional full backup exists prior to the differential. Perform Snap Integrity Check is used to run an integrity check on a hardware snap during an IntelliSnap backup. The check verifies the integrity of the captured data files by mounting them to a proxy and attaching and detaching the database to the SQL server. Allow differential backup for read-only databases. This option allows differential backups on read-only databases. Do note, this option does not apply to IntelliSnap or block-level backups. Traditional VDI backup. Partial excludes read-only file groups. If you want to exclude read-only file groups from the backed up data, run a partial backup job. A partial backup contains data in the primary file group, read and write file group, and any optionally specified read-only files. Partial backup of a read-only database contains only the primary file group. Tail log backup. Available only for a transaction log backup on a damaged database. Backs up tail of the log to capture the log records that have not yet been backed up. A tail log backup recovers a database to the point of failure. If you do not select this option, you can recover a database only to the end of the last backup that was created before the failure. For example, if a database was damaged, or a data file was deleted, start a tail log backup before attempting a file or file group restore operation. After the log tail is backed up, the database is left in the restoring state. Before starting the tail log backup, verify that the SQL Server database is set to a full or a bulk logged recovery model. Native SQL Backup Compression enables SQL Server to compress the backup before the database is backed up by Commvault. Checksum. This option runs checksum validation during a backup operation to identify corrupt databases. Mismatched values returned during checksum validation indicate a corrupt database or page corruption on disk. Continue after error. This option ignores errors encountered during a backup operation and completes the job. By default, a backup job fails if the SQL Server encounters an error during a backup operation. Startup tab. Priority is the job priority, for which you can use default priority of 166, or change the priority of a job between 0, highest priority, and 999, lowest priority. Startup in suspended state helps to start the job in the job controller in a suspended state. Please note that this job cannot run until the job is manually resumed. Ignore the disabled activity control settings. Enabling this option will ignore the disable activity control settings set on the Activity Control tab on the CommServe properties and continue to run the backup operations. Job Retry tab. Enable total running time is the maximum elapsed time in hours and minutes from the time that the job is started. When the specified maximum elapsed time is reached, if the job is in the running state, it will continue, but if the job is not in the running state, then the job manager will kill the job. Kill running jobs when total running time expires. This option will kill the job when the specified total running time has elapsed, even if job state is running. Number of resubmits on job failure is the number of times the job manager will attempt to resubmit a failed job with a new job ID after the maximum number of resubmit attempts has been reached. If the job still fails, the job manager will stop resubmitting the job. Enable number of retries is the number of times that job manager will attempt to restart the job before killing it. Do note that this job-based setting will not be valid if restart ability has been turned off in the job management settings. Media tab. Start new media. This option starts the backup on a new media, ignoring the available appendable media on tape library. For disk library, it creates a new volume folder. Media full on success. Once the job completes successfully, this option marks media full 2 minutes after the completion of the backup operation. If any jobs are initiated within the 2 minutes, they are allowed to write to the media. Allow other schedule to use media set. Allows jobs that are part of a schedule policy or schedule, and using the same storage policy, to start a new media, and also prevent other jobs from writing to the set of media. Example: when one scheduled job initiates several jobs, and you only want to start new media on the first job. Job retention. Storage policy default applies the retention rules of the associated storage policy, which is the default option. Infinite. To retain this job indefinitely. For n days, prunes the job after the specified number of days. Make sure that the value you specify is greater than the storage policy. Retention applicable on the copies in the storage policy, that is, the primary storage policy copy, or all the storage policy copies in the storage policy, or select copies. Select the copies from the list of copies that appear below. Data Path tab. If you want the backup to run via a specific media agent and library other than the default one, then select the desired one from the list. Vault Tracking tab. This tab helps to export tape media using Vault Tracker. Export media after job finishes. When selected, the media used by the backup, and whose status meet the selected media status criteria are exported, and tracked by the Vault Tracker feature. Exclude media not copied. When selected, media with jobs that have not been copied onto the secondary copies are not exported. Media status helps to pick the media with appropriate status, that is, all media, full media, active media, bad media, and overwrite protected, whose status is marked as read-only. Export location. Select a location from the list of stationary locations. Track transit. To track the transit information, you can select a transit location from the available list. Use virtual mail slots. When selected, exported media is moved to the virtual mail slots within the library. Filter media by retention. Specifies that media are exported based on whether the media have extended retention jobs or not. The retention specified at the storage policy copy level are honored, and not the manually retained ones. Media with extended retention jobs specifies that media with extended retention job are exported. Media with no extended retention jobs specifies that media with no extended retention jobs are exported. Alert tab. You can configure alert for this subclient. Use Add Alert to launch the alert configuration window to view, add, modify, disable, and delete alert. Once done, click OK or Cancel. Click OK to start the job, or Cancel to close the window. Let's review the sudo AG client properties. Right-click on the client computer. Select Properties. Client Computer Properties. General tab. Name is the client name to uniquely identify the client in the COMCEL environment. Display name is the name of the client as it is displayed in the COMCEL browser. Host name should be usually a fully qualified domain name, but here it's a pseudo client name. Edit display name is used to change the display name for the client. Edit is used to update the client name, the host name, and the COMSERV host name for the client. Time information. Override. When selected, you can set the time zone of the client computer. Overriding the local client time zone is helpful if your client is a pseudo client. After the time zone is set, The backup schedules for the client, honor the new time zone. If the override checkbox is cleared, the client's services are automatically restarted, and the local time zone of the client computer is displayed. Security tab. Privacy. Prevent administrators from viewing or downloading your data. This option is not available for this agent, but it usually helps to prevent users and administrators who are not client owners from seeing the data on the client. Only a client owner may access data protected on the client. Associations tab. We have already discussed these options. Owners tab shows the users or user groups who can access this client computer through the COMSEL console, and who can run web console browse and restore operations on this client. Groups tab. This window helps to associate a client to a client group, or remove the association from a group. Show Only Selected will show only the selected client computer group for this client. Activity Control tab. By default, Enable Backup, Enable Restore, and Enable Data Aging options are checked. If you clear any of these options, then respective operation task will be started as per schedule, but a fail to start, with reason data management activity is disabled. When you clear these options, you get another option to enable respective task after a delay. You can choose the option to select a specific date and time when the backup, restore or data aging activity can be enabled. Do note, disabling the option at this level will impact all the SQL instances configured for backup for this client computer. Order tab. This tab helps to create notes. For example, you can keep notes about maintenance or software installations. Ordered history lists all of the notes previously entered about the client, including the user who entered the note, the severity, and the date that the note was entered. Use the New Audit button to open the New Audit dialog box. Click Advanced. General tab. We discussed IntelliSnap on default subclient, hence skipping it. CDR log file location. Enter the path, or click Browse, to specify the location of the Continuous Data Replicator, CDR, log files, and how often the logs must be replayed. CDR performs replication by logging all activities in the source computer, and replaying the log in the destination computer. Enter alternate cache partition for QSnap. Please ensure that the volume specified is an NTFS volume. Use this space to change the location of the QSnap, copy on write, cow, cache for all volumes on the client. Job Configuration tab. Enable Job Throttle is not applicable for this client. Job Results Directory for Linux or Windows clients. Job Results Directory is the directory where the job results of client computer backup and restore operations are written. You can change this location by entering a new path. If you change this path, all existing job results are copied to the new path as well. Prune Job Results After N days is the number of days the job results for data protection and data recovery operations are maintained on the client computer. Prune Job Results when disk capacity reaches N%, is the percentage of the disk capacity when reached. The old job results for data protection and data recovery operations are pruned on the client computer. Low space threshold job results folder, in MB, specifies the low space threshold limit, in MB, for the job results folder. If the amount of free space in the job results folder falls below the specified amount, an event message is generated. The client's disk space low alert is also generated, if configured. Maximum number of parallel data transfer operations. It is the number of streams that the software allocates for backup for the client. This option honors stream throttling at the client level. When you set this option, the resource manager verifies that the total number of streams associated with a client at any point of time does not exceed the set value, irrespective of the setting defined at the subclient level. If all streams are in use, then the new jobs remain in the waiting state until all streams are available. Change status of all data interface pairs to. This option sets the status of all defined interface pairs on this client to either enabled or disabled. Once option enabled, select a status from the list. Please note, you need to manually push of network configuration after changing, to put into effect. Data interface pairs lists data interface pairs configured for the client. You can view which data interface pair is active or disabled. You can add, delete, and edit the data interface pairs using these options. We will try creating a separate video for this topic. Encryption tab. By default, Use Storage Policy Settings option is selected. Encrypt data with following settings. Data encryption algorithm displays the ciphers available for data transfer. Key length displays the key lengths available for the selected cipher. Note that the key length displayed will vary according to the selected cipher. Direct media access, external restore tools. Via media password means data encryption keys are stored scrambled on the media. No access means data encryption keys are not stored on the media. If you wish not to encrypt data, then select Do Not Encrypt. Content Indexing tab. We can associate this client to a content indexing policy by enabling content indexing. When enabled, the content indexing engine will content index the data associated with the client. If content indexing is enabled in the storage policies associated with the sub-clients within the client. Deduplication tab. Deduplication options. Client-side deduplication. By default, Use Storage Policy Settings option is enabled, which means all clients associated to the storage policy with deduplication enabled will honor the source-side deduplication. Perform client-side deduplication. Select this option to deduplicate the backup data at the source side, before transferring the data to media agent. This setting is applicable to all deduplication-enabled jobs on this client. Enable client-side disk cache. Select this option to maintain a local cache for deduplicated data. The signature is first compared in the local cache. When this option is enabled, each sub-client will maintain its own cache under job results directory. The default limit for the max cache size is 4096 MB, but you can change it as desired. Enable high latency optimization. Use this option to increase backup performance when clients are in delayed network, high latency environments, like WAN, and are in fast network, high bandwidth environments like LAN. This option is not supported for a storage policy copy configured with Cloud Storage Library. When high latency optimization is enabled, the client compares the signature against the local cache. The DDB is not looked up by the client. Disable client-side deduplication. Select this option to disable source-side deduplication on the client computer. This is useful when client-side deduplication option is enabled on the storage policy copy, and you want to disable source-side deduplication on specific clients associated to that storage policy copy. Enable variable content alignment. Variable content alignment is a content-aware approach to deduplication that further reduces the amount of data stored during backups. This may be more effective for certain database backups. It accomplishes this by aligning the segment boundaries of the backup data stream, as minor changes to the data in the stream are made between incremental backups. Therefore, the effectiveness of deduplication increases more with this feature on client systems that experience small changes to the backup data. Variable content alignment is performed on the client system, and consequently you might experience some performance overhead, especially when used together with software compression. Enabling this option midway, for a client which has already done some deduplication backups, will result in consumption of more space on the disk library. This happens because a fresh copy of the deduplicated data blocks with new signature is created for that DDB. Hence, this new signature will not match the existing signatures available in the deduplication database, and thus creates a new baseline for the DDB. KPIs tab. We can configure key performance indicators that appears in reports. Exclude from SLA and strike counts. When this option is selected, the client is excluded from the service level agreement, SLA calculation and the client strike calculation for the worldwide dashboard, COMCEL dashboard, SLA report, and client strike count report. When this option is cleared, the client is included in these calculations. Copy redundancy allows you to specify the minimum number of copies required to meet the copy redundancy SLA that is calculated in the copy redundancy SLA report. Maximum allowed auxiliary copy fallen behind. It is the maximum time interval that auxiliary copy can fall behind before it goes into warning or critical status in the fallen behind secondary copies tile in the health report. Recovery point objective, RPO. You can specify the number of days, hours, and minutes that make up the RPO. The RPO is the maximum number of hours that data can be lost during a service disruption. These settings will be used to calculate the data that appears in the recovery point and time report. Recovery time objective, RTO. You can specify the number of days, hours, and minutes that make up the RTO. The RTO is the maximum amount of time allowed to restore after a service disruption. The results appear in the recovery point and time report. Once done, click OK or cancel. Again, click OK or cancel. We will end this video here. Do subscribe for more videos, if not already done so. Do subscribe for more videos.